For more than a century, the British Crown and its American colonies maintained a deeply peaceful, highly profitable relationship. This map illustrates the literal gulf between them, a 3,000-mile expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. In the 1700s, it took at least 2 months for news from America or orders from the monarch to cross that water. Because of this communication delay, colonial governors and legislatures handled everyday administrative and economic problems on their own. Physical distance insulated the colonies. Without constant oversight, they spent generations building a culture of self-governance. That dynamic broke in 1763. Great Britain defeated France in the French and Indian War, securing the eastern third of the North American continent. But the victory left the crown with enormous imperial debt. To guard these new lands against rebellions, Britain maintained a standing army in the colonies, adding ongoing financial strain to the imperial treasury. To survive the financial crisis, King George III and his ministers pivoted, viewing the colonies as an active revenue stream required to pay down the empire's debt. This sheet of identical one-penny stamps represents the Crown's first direct intervention. The Stamp Act of 1765 required these bureaucratic stamps on all legal documents, pamphlets, and newspapers. Colonists responded with widespread boycotts of British goods and formed committees of correspondence to coordinate resistance across different colonies. By 1773, as Parliament passed the Townshend Acts, economic tension reached a breaking point. In Boston Harbor, a group of colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians dumped 342 chests of British tea into the water. Parliament retaliated with the Coercive Acts, shutting down Boston Harbor and revoking the Massachusetts colony's right to govern itself. The Crown's attempt to force submission demonstrated to the colonies that localized resistance was insufficient. Realizing they needed a coordinated response, delegates from 12 colonies formed the First Continental Congress to enforce a strict trade embargo against Britain. The situation escalated into warfare on April 19, 1775, when British redcoats and colonial Minutemen exchanged fire at Lexington and Concord. The Second Continental Congress soon convened, acting as an emergency central government to organize a unified Continental Army and Navy. Public opinion shifted as the war progressed. In Common Sense, Thomas Paine argued that the core issue was the inherent corruption of the monarchy itself. The struggle for financial redress evolved into a radical ideological war for freedom. In June 1776, Virginia delegate Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution for freedom, and Thomas Jefferson was tasked with drafting the formal declaration. In this broadside of the Declaration of Independence, the preamble establishes natural law. Basic rights come from a higher power. Government derives power purely from the people's consent. The middle section itemizes King George III's violations of civil and economic liberties, legally justifying the break. Jefferson engineered a governing framework based on human liberty and the consent of the governed. Congress approved the final draft on July 4, 1776, marked by John Hancock's deliberate inkstrokes. This map shows the new geopolitical reality. The 13 colonies became independent, self-governing states. Without a king, these states began drafting individual constitutions, prioritizing personal liberties and limited government power. The pressure of imperial debt forced the colonies to articulate the rights of humanity, establishing the legal and philosophical framework for the United States.